career progressions. Let's see what we're going to cover today and cover a few housekeeping points. If you're listening to the webinar and your audio is not as clear as you like, please dial into the number on the screen. If the small window pane is blocking your screen on the right, you can minimize that by clicking on the small arrow slightly to the left of the pane. And if you have any questions, you can open the pane and type your questions in for us to take answers at the end. So today we've got some exciting topics to cover. We're going to first go quite broad on the topic of communication, and then we're going to get focused in terms of using the DISC language and doing a bit of a DISC refresher, finishing up with how to facilitate a coaching conversation. So let's get started. The impact of communication, I think, is pretty obvious to people. The University of Pittsburgh did a business school study recently and surveyed companies with 50,000 employees or more, and their results matter to anyone who wants to get ahead in business. You can see that good communication skills are the main factor contributing to job success. The second quote is from a survey done by Towers Perrin and Watson Wyatt, and this tells us that communication is a leading indicator of financial performance and a driver of employee engagement. This was a very exciting study, and you can hit on the link and find out more. I think an important point is that companies with highly effective communicators had a 47% higher total return to shareholders in 5 years than their counterparts who were least effective. The third quote comes from a research study done by Accountemps that looked at 150 senior executives from the nation's 1,000 largest companies, and this was in the U.S. The one question that was most important was a question about the best remedy for low morale. 48% gave communication in their answer, and the next highest score was 19%, saying that recognition was important. So if you put those two together, communication and recognition, it's a staggering 70%. Just shows us how important communication is. In terms of our own Thomas informal research, we do find communication at the top of the list of success factors in our team workshops. Time and time again, communication comes out as the #1 critical success factor for teams at all levels. What you can see now on your screen is a very short communication quiz. We're going to poll your scores, and so I'm going to give you about 3 minutes to consider each of the statements and then determine whether your score is a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. You may want to take a scrap of paper and list the numbers 1 to 10 on your sheet, and then put your score next to the numbers. The maximum score is 5, and so you'll be able to score yourself, and then we'll take the poll. It's important to have the number of the question and what you scored yourself for discussion after we do the quiz. So there'll be silence for about 3 minutes while you score yourself on the communication quiz, and then we will take it up in the form of a poll. For those of you that have just joined our webinar, we're working on a communication quiz and giving our participants about 3 minutes to determine how they stack up in terms of their communication skills. We'll be keeping silence for about another minute while you finish this off. "30 seconds left, and then we're going to open the poll. So score your questions, and let's see how you've done. Okay, here's an opportunity to cast your vote in terms of your score, so we can take a quick read on our audience and see how we stack up in terms of communication. So here's our results. 80% of you have fallen into the strong communication skill category, which is absolutely fabulous. And the other 20% are at the average level, which is still a very, very good score. No one on the webinar is at the weak communication skills level. And isn't that ironical? Most of the people who want to learn about communication are, in fact, good or excellent communicators already. Something that you can do with the poll questions or the quiz, you can go back to this after the fact and have a look at the items where you scored lowest. So for example, you might have scored yourself 5 on feeling very confident about your abilities, but maybe the fact that you don't maintain eye contact when talking with others, this may disadvantage you. So have a look at your weakest scores out of the 10 statements, and then see what you can do about improving those scores. So think about some action items that will allow you to address those scores. So for example, something you can do if it's hard to pay attention. I know for me, I'm not that good of a listener. So for number 3, I give my full attention to others when they talk to me. I've got to be very, very careful about this. And one of the techniques I use is I take copious notes when people are talking to me. This forces me to stop and listen, take notes that I can refer back to, and be able to paraphrase my next statements. So there's some awesome learning here, and at the end of the webinar, there's a much longer quiz of about 35 questions, which is a free quiz on Psychology Today, and you'll be able to access that if you'd like to take up a little bit more in terms of evaluating yourself in terms of communication. The next step is to think about those barriers to communication. Most of us want to communicate effectively, so it's helpful to understand the barriers to communicating effectively. Obviously, noise is a significant barrier. However, there are several more subtle barriers. Social psychologists say that there's a 50 to 70% loss of meaning while conveying a message from a sender to a receiver. And I think that's the important point. For a message to be conveyed, there's a sender who sends the message, there's a receiver who receives the message, and the response of the receiver will tell the sender whether the receiver has actually received the message effectively. The feedback barrier is an important barrier. This occurs when people forget to ask for feedback or forget to wait and clarify that the communicator has